This conference will now be recorded.
Second. Second. All in favor? No. That motion. Second. All in favor? All right, next is staff updates. Zach.
Whoever's online.
I'm trying to see who it is.
Looks like it's Mike King. Alrighty, let's go ahead and get started. So we have an Earth Day litter sweep coming up. That's going to be on Friday, April 22nd from 12 to 5 p.m. We ask all volunteers to meet up here at Town Hall, and we're going to be trying to cover Taylor Notion Road, Highway 24, and NC 58. So it should be a good afternoon of doing some litter sweep and a good Earth Day activity. And then we also have the Spring Yard of the Season contest that's coming up. Judging will take place on May 6th, and that's by the Cape Carteret Garden Club. So the sign-up form's on the town's website. We also have an event on Facebook. And then you can also reach out to Barbara Owens up here at Town Hall, and she'll get you signed up for the contest. So definitely, if you've got a neighbor or if you've got a really good yard, make sure you spread the word throughout the town so we get a good number of participants in the contest. And then the Cape Carteret Garden Club also has their Art in Bloom event that's on Friday, April 22nd, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. And that's at the Western Park Community Center. And then we had a representative from the Crystal Coast Celebration stop by, and that's a North Carolina shell show from May 6th through May 8th. So for all you shell enthusiasts, this is a good opportunity. So definitely check that out. When I recognize Ms. Dot Marsky, she was the first one to use the new swing at the Pettiford Creek launch site. And she inspired us to shoot our Connect with Cape Carteret video down there, and want to give her a shout out too for appearing at the food truck rodeo. And you can see Todd the leprechaun. So we had a really good turnout. Want to thank all the staff who put it on. There's Chief enjoying the food truck rodeo. They had a really good turnout. really nice event. Want to really recognize Barbara Owen. She did a great job in putting it all together, and it was great to see that many people come out on a Thursday night. So something we'll definitely want to do again in the future. And then we had our Easter egg hunt this past Saturday, and you can see Mayor Baker there with his Inky.
That's Inky.
Inky. So was in full attire and dressed up for the day, and then also the Easter Bunny there on the left. Had some good volunteers. I had to probably recognize this volunteer here. And I also see Ryan there in the background putting out some Easter eggs. We put out over 11,000 Easter eggs out there, and you wouldn't believe it because they were gone probably in about 1 to 2 minutes. It was amazing how fast they went. Want to recognize Starbucks. They contributed Easter eggs to the effort as well. And there's another shot of the Easter Bunny. Some more pictures from the event. Got Officer Garrett and Mike Bishop, who brought his family as well. And some of the shots from the Easter egg hunt. And I also want to take a moment, want to thank Mac Daddies for allowing us to have it out there on the driving range. I think we had a great turnout, so that was something we're definitely interested in doing in future years. Want to recognize West Carteret Water Corporation, who donated eggs, as well as the Salvation Army, who also donated eggs and served food at the event. So as well as Starbucks, as I mentioned, and then the town of Cape Carteret also donated eggs. So really a great collective effort. Based on how fast the eggs went, we're probably going to have to double the eggs to 22,000 eggs next year. So we have a good fundraising goal to shoot towards. But and then just we'll mention that the Public Works Department's been demoing equipment to clean out culverts throughout the town. So this is them over on Sutton Drive. They were demoing that jetting machine on that pipe that runs north off of Sutton. And then also use the ditch witch machine in a number of boxes throughout the town to get a feel for that. And that's all I have for the update this month. So I don't know if Chief's got some things he wants to share. What? Yeah, I'll do that at that. Yeah.
Just a couple things. Issue number 1 over Cape Carteret Neighborhood Watch. Well, thanks to Sarah Wax, and she put it all together for us. And there's some copies back there if y'all would like to pick up one. So we had a good meeting in March 16th. And then this month, the 21st, we'll be having another meeting. March ended with ice cream, and this next week after next, we'll have some hamburgers and hot dogs. Look forward to people coming out. Also, just another mention, of course, we never got our RUOK program off the ground because of equipment. But we still offer the courtesy calls to the elderly residents. You know someone that you think would like a daily call, just let me know. I'll let one of my officers know. I have approached a couple of the residents. They seem shy. I guess I scared them. I don't know. But anyway, we do offer that service. So if you do know someone, just put the word out so that we can also provide that service to them.
Well, thank you, Chief. Next up, planning board updates. Susan's not here, so.
Susan asked that I share an update from their meeting. But
All right.
before I do that, I'll mention, and Heather just reminded me of this, and Heather, are they online? They are online.
Okay.
So we do have some prospective tenants for the rental space up front for Unit A that we had recently advertised, and I think they had some information to share. Let's see.
Hello, can anybody hear me?
Yes, yeah, we can hear you.
All right, perfect. So I don't know if anybody has it in front of them, but I put together just a brief little overview of a business plan that I had, and it's called Aloha Kids. And essentially what it would be is a drop-in daycare facility. So any parents who would like to drop off their kids for a couple hours, who want to go run some errands or even date nights on Saturday or Friday nights. Just a safe and reliable and fun place for kids to be able to go to, and a place where parents can trust to have their kids to be dropped off for a couple hours so they can do what they have to do, whether it's going to the grocery store, like I said, going out to have dinner with their loved ones, so on and so forth. So that's something that I feel like would be a perfect location. It's right next to the police station. It's so like super safe for kids to be there. And the closest place is going to be Jacksonville and Morehead City. And there's nothing that is right in our area for that specifically. And we have tons of kids in our town. I live in Marsh Harbor. And I mean, there's kids running left and right, my son being one of them. So just having that for them, for the parents, for everybody, especially even the summer people who come into town, want to go out to dinner, but, wanted to drop off the kids for a little bit, having a place where they can do that. So if anyone has any questions in regards to it, please feel free to ask any questions.
Anybody have any questions, comments? All right. Well, we thank you for your time here this evening and your presentation.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys.
Yep, so we just wanted to provide an opportunity, to give you all some insight. That's something I think we'll have on the agenda for next month for consideration of getting a new tenant in that space.
Okay.
And, if we want to move a little bit faster, we can do a 1-year lease agreement and then extend that at a later date just to get them in there. Otherwise, we got to do a 30-day public notice in advance of the meeting and advertise the terms of that lease agreement and all that. So that's something we can talk about a little bit more, just if there's direction that y'all want to proceed on that, or if y'all have any feedback based off of that presentation. Like I said, we put it out last Monday and we've had 2 prospective folks reach out. So just wanted to present what we have so far in terms of interest in the space.
So when would they be wanting to move in?
Let me see if she's still, I think we.
Yep, I'm still here. So we could do it, whenever. And what I understood is that the lease for the other folks that were in there would be up at the beginning of May or sometime in May. So obviously that's when I would like to come in there and start bringing in, toys and other things for the kids and really have it set up so that it can be up and running come June for summer months and whatnot to really get going.
Okay. Turn your mic on so she can hear you.
How many kids would you be able to manage at a time?
So the facility, it's 2,000 square feet, and because it is a drop-in daycare, there are no state regulations. That would actually be something that would be through the town itself, so through you guys, if there are any regulations that you have in terms of daycare facilities. As far as square footage wise, I have been going based off of a regular child care facility, which is every 25 square feet per child, and I understand it's 2,400 square feet. So it could hold up to, almost 40 kids. What I would have, and it's listed, sorry, that's loud.
It's a big truck.
Sorry about that. Loud car outside. So what I would have set up is it would be 1 teacher or 1 employee, 1 staff member per every 15 kids.
I do have one comment or question.
Yeah.
I noticed that the comment was made, if parents had not arrived 1 hour after closing, the police would be notified.
Correct.
Police could certainly assist in trying to contact parents. I want to make sure it's not that any kids that are still here after an hour are turned over to the police and they're now responsibility.
No, the staff member, whether it was me that was there, whoever it is, they would be responsible to stay with the child, but the police will just be notified to let them know, hey, a parent hasn't come to pick up their child. We will keep the child with us and we will stay there until so. But it is actually part of the state regulations that the police are notified an hour past closing time if a child's not picked up, just the same way as if, a parent didn't come pick up their kid from school. eventually, as many resources as they have, they'll be contacted, and eventually the police will be contacted as well.
Okay, thank you.
Right. So for her to do that in May, it would be more appropriate to do the 1-year lease like you're talking about.
Yes, yeah. So if there's interest in moving forward with Aloha Kids as a tenant, then we could go ahead and draft up that lease agreement and have that for the meeting next month as a 1-year lease agreement. And then we could come back the following month and we could extend it, or we can just wait that year and cover that next year as well, whatever the preference of the board is.
All right.
Zach, how many people have reached out with interest on that property?
So we've got two current prospective entities. The other one
This
being
lady here and who else?
the Girl Scouts. We're interested in that space as a regional headquarters.
Reason I asked is I got a phone call from Chris Collett that rents the other end, and he was supposed to get in touch with you in the next few days about interest from office use from somebody that he knows. I don't know if you want to wait. I prefer to put it on the agenda. Has the roof ever been fixed on it yet?
Ron's been looking into to that situation to try to see. We took a look at how it had been repaired in the past. It might be possible to do some repairs in
I
house.
just don't feel like it's been advertised long enough to give everybody that with potential interest a chance to reach out to you about it, and maybe we have more choices, I guess is what I'm saying. I know this lady spoke about crunch time or whatever, but maybe someone else would want to rent it. Feel more better rent it to or whatever, but without, and I would like to hear about parking issues. There's limited parking over there too. I just think it needs to come back in the form of a bona fide agenda item with public comment and what have you with potential people after a certain length of time that are interested in renting. That's just my opinion. That's my opinion only.
And one thing I'll just mention is just keep in mind that, these businesses are looking at spaces. So there's a chance if they're interested now, and we don't give them at least a tentative tentative commitment, they might go elsewhere. I know there's other spaces available, but just kind of a double-edged sword there. So
It's kind of hard to be put on the spot with make a decision in 10 minutes based on what this lady's saying. I like to see it in front of me. How many cars are we talking about? A lot of issues here. How many parking places are set aside for that business anyway?
we have those out front, got two back here, and then depending on the hours of operation of the business, like if it's an evening time business, then that whole parking lot over there is going to be available for that. So might be some benefit to a business that might be primarily in the evening because they'd have ample parking over in the town parking lot. So.
Is this roofing going to interfere with?
That's what I was going to ask. Yeah, what's the time? I mean, she gave a pretty tight timeline of move out to move in. And then, talking about just maybe doing some patchwork on that. I mean, is there going to be some time where it's vacant enough for you guys to do whatever you want to do?
I don't think it'll take too long. I mean, we'll have till May to get up there and take a look at it. I think letting Ryan take a shot at it and see if, because we know where the two spots are, and just see if we're able to address that in-house. Be much more cost efficient to do it that way as opposed to having to do the whole thing and then see if that holds up or not. So. We did. That was under the advice of some former staff about it, the whole thing needing to be replaced. So this will give us, we'll see. We'll kind of have to evaluate if we do some patching up there and it's done correctly, if that holds up and addresses the issue. So.
And if more time is necessary, I have no problem, waiting until it is fixed entirely. I'd rather have that done the right way. Obviously the sooner the better, but if it needs more time, then that's totally okay as well.
When is the current lease expire?
They'll be out. They're out now, but it will be by May 1st.
Okay.
So that's what I was basing the timeline off of, was them moving out and being able to get up and running as soon as they're out. But if more time was necessary, I can push it off longer.
I think we should.
Written statement of what their business was, all the details where we could have ample time to study, not just make a snap decision in 15 minutes.
Yeah, and I did send that out with a weekly update today, so I don't know if you had a chance to review it or not. I did just have it on the screen as well, but yeah, I mean, we can certainly come back next month with all of the options, you know, and go from there. Just keep in mind, each month we go without a tenant in there, we're going to be losing that revenue. So
My recommendation would be next month. Give it another month to see what the issues are with the roof. Is patchwork going to be good, or is it going to require more work than that? And see if there are more applicants for it. I mean, and then we may maybe make a decision next month. That would be my recommendation.
I know we're anxious to warn this month's revenue. Something that you can email us the applications we'll be studying, and then maybe give you a general consensus, Brett, before the meeting next month.
Well, I think the council will still have to approve it in May, so I think it needs to be brought back before, but like you said, with the options of who's applied and who staff recommends, and then of course.
A written contract.
Right.
If you guys enter into that contract.
It would be a similar lease of what we have with the other tenant, so I can get that lease ready for next month.
All right. Any other comments? All right, we'll see if anybody else pops up, might be interested.
yeah, we'll send those along as they come in. I believe we got this in this morning, right? And so we sent that out as soon as it came in. So as additional ones come in, we'll email it out to the board. So there's ample time to review the options.
Are you gonna send the other one out that you got?
We haven't gotten anything formal from
Okay.
them, just an email saying they're looking into it. So
Okay.
yeah, if
Yeah.
we get something formal from them, we'll send that out.
Yeah.
When we do get that.
Zach, I would ask you if you don't mind to call Chris Call and talk to him to see. I don't know if he's trying to get in touch with you and been unsuccessful.
No, I haven't been contacted by Chris.
2
Yeah.
days ago. Maybe he hasn't got around to it.
Okay, well, I'll be on the lookout for something from them then.
You want to call him?
I mean, I can call them if that's the direction to reach out. I don't mind reaching out to them.
We have a requirement to post this for any length of time.
No, if it's a lease of more than a year, then you have to have a public hearing. If it's a year or less, then you can do it.
All right, no more comments or questions on that? And that concludes your updates, correct?
Yes,
And
and
the
then-
planning board updates as well.
Yep, so planning board talked about some changes to the stormwater ordinance, addressing some additional provisions that would be blanket across all residential development in the town, and address the additional impervious area situations if there's impervious area that's being added, and then also to provide for the impervious area of new construction. So that was one of the discussions. And then the other discussion was about mixed use zoning and talking through some of the parameters and processes for that. And then the third kind of discussion that took place was the planning board expressing a desire for the board of commissioners to task them with certain items to work on and projects to work on. I believe the planning board is coming up with a list of things that they would like to work on, which I expect they might bring at a future date to the board of commissioners. If there's any guidance or feedback on how the board would like to proceed on that, you can definitely share that. Or we could just wait until the planning board comes back with their list of items that they want to work on. So that's the update from the planning board.
Okay, thank you. Next up is public comments. I think we only had one person sign up. Do we have anybody else? So Ms. Merst, if you would.
I would like to commend the town for hiring such excellent employees. Every one of them is very efficient and amiable. The most obvious work has been done recently, and it is the yard waste pickup. And the clean condition, the pickup areas have been left. I also want to thank the commissioners for restoring the 2 pickup collections that had been dropped over the hurricanes. The March 17th festival was great, and luckily the weather was too. There was a lot of work done behind and on the scene by all the employees to make it go so well. My only park experience has been with the Pettiford Creek kayak launch, where it has picnic tables, a very nice wooden swing, more benches, and a dock to walk on. I waited on the swing while my son kayaked, and I saw people other than kayakers come to enjoy the area, and some even came for lunch. I love the monthly Connect video that is online. It is informative and entertaining. There is so much more that is being done other than what I'm speaking of, including the fine police force we have, trail and road work, and nothing is accomplished without guidance and planning. My original intent was simply to congratulate the town employees for doing such a fine job. Then I remembered that I had gone to the planning board meeting. The major part of the meeting was about rain causing water runoff and specific details of how it should be written up. One board member mentioned that she had property graded with a swale. The property was sold and the land was flattened out and the needed swale disappeared. After the meeting, I asked how that could be allowed. Was it the job of a building inspector? I do believe there should be someone in charge of inspecting new construction so it does not create a drainage problem. I have even on my street seen how water settled in the right of way where it did not settle before after a home had been built. One pond lasted so long, it had pollywogs swimming in it. What good is it to have rules if no one is enforcing them? We do not have an in-house building inspector. I asked and learned we use the county. My personal experience with the county inspector is that work was allowed on our home that should not have been permitted and was actually dangerous. Why do we not have an in-house building inspector that cares about our town and our residents? Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else sign up?
No, sir.
Okay. Next up is a consideration of the 2022 pay study. Zach?
All right, so town staff has completed an in-house pay study, which was previously sent out to the Board of Commissioners for review. Prior to our first budget workshop, staff is seeking direction from the Board of Commissioners on whether the recommended actions of the pay study should be incorporated into the draft budget for FY 2022-2023. And the Board of Commissioners are asked to provide direction to town staff on what actions to take based on the findings of the pay study. And we attached the pay study in the packet. We can go through that if we want to get into specifics. I know there's been a little bit of time to review all of that, so I don't know how many questions have come up. I'd be happy to answer those or talk in greater detail about that. And then Chief McKinney's also provided some literature as well in regards to the police department. So that's at everybody's seat as well, but just asking for direction as we work towards developing the draft budget, if this is something the board would like to move forward on in terms of incorporating it into the budget. It's obviously has a significant impact on the overall budget. So I want to make sure, if that's the direction that we're incorporating that and presenting it to everybody at our upcoming budget workshop meeting. And, I just can't underscore enough how important it is that we address some of the pay disparities. I think from a retention standpoint, especially in the police department. I think we have a significant risk of losing officers if we're not able to address some of the pay gap that we have in comparison to other agencies throughout the county. And I know, you can't always compare, one town to another, but we do have to understand we're all in the same labor market and we're competing with other agencies, even though they might have a much larger tax base than us. So it's definitely something that I feel is very important to address and, is critical in terms of retaining the qualified and competent police force that we have now. So I would definitely recommend that we look at that further. And, in terms of the other departments, the gap was not quite as large when comparing to other towns throughout Carteret County, but there was some slight adjustments across the positions that I think would be beneficial to make sure we are competitive. We compared our hiring rates to the hiring rates of other municipalities. It's important to take into account that actual salaries at other municipalities are much higher because people have been there for some time, but that was a fair kind of apples to apples comparison for the purposes of the study. And in the public works department, we looked at creating a public works technician level 2, and that level 2 position would be a technician that possesses a CDL, and this would provide some incentive for our public works team to earn their CDLs so that we have a couple of different folks who can operate the yard debris truck for pickups and all that. So I think it's some good strategic recommendations that are included in the pay study. And I think it's something that, is important for us to invest in, just like we are all feeling the pinch of inflation and, kind of the challenging economic times we're in right now. Our employees are feeling it, and, it's something that, folks, we can only do so much in terms of the workplace culture and environment we have here. At some point, it becomes a business decision of whether they can put food on the table for their family. So I think this is something that's very important. I'd be happy to answer any questions about it. So.
Any comments or questions for Zach?
I can only speak for myself, but when inflation is going through the roof, the answer is not to inflate your budget. Now, that being said, I'm not saying no to all of the things in here, but we should approve a budget in 2 months. I don't believe, given the current state of all of that's going on in the world, that we can make decisions about these budget items in a vacuum without having looked at the actual budget.
I agree with you.
That's my 2 cents there.
I agree with that. I'm 100% on board with this. We definitely need to remain competitive in all of our salaries, but I think it's something we've got to discuss in detail in our budget planning, which we're getting ready to start off going for the next year. We've got to start looking at it, what we've got coming in, what's going out, and then make the decisions on where we can go. It's definitely not a decision we could make tonight, based on reading through this material.
Yeah, for clarification, all I'm asking for is just to be able to include it in the budget, include these numbers that we came up with in the pay study. So we have a good idea about where we are. If I can get that budget updated. I know we sent around some emails earlier trying to pinpoint a date for that first budget workshop, but all I'm asking for this evening is just to incorporate it into the budget, and then we can continue the conversation then. So it doesn't mean that the budget is approved with those in it, just means that we're incorporating that into the budget so we have a good kind of snapshot of that, what the budgetary impact is of doing that.
So we're just,
Yeah,
oh, I'm sorry.
I got a few questions here, Zach. You mentioned 2.5% salary increase when employees reach professional milestones. How close is our clerk to obtaining any of those, or has she already obtained some of these that you've listed here? And I could have asked Heather that, but I'm asking you as the town manager. I mean, have you obtained any certifications as a clerk, like certified municipal clerk, North Carolina certified municipal clerk? You have not obtained those? Okay, so how close are you? Okay, that answers that question. Who is our certified zoning officer?
I'm a certified zoning officer, but I already possess that certification, so I'm not asking for any increase or anything like that.
Who is our certified floodplain
That
manager?
is me as well.
So you're a jack of all trades, okay.
So that.
In reading this, there's no question, everybody in this room knows that our police department's grossly underpaid when it's compared to other municipalities. That's not a secret. I agree with what Commissioner Miller and Commissioner Morgan said. I think we need to wait until this is till the budget discussions, which that's what you're asking for anyway, Zach. So to include it, I'm all for including it for discussion in the budget. But I would like to know what you mentioned also. This would not recommend COLA increases. This would not include COLA increases. Is that correct?
Yes, that's
So
correct.
are you going to be asking for a COLA increase again this year?
And I think that's part of the broader discussion we have to have in the budget process. You know, people are all over the board right now with what they're going for COLA.
So you have no idea if you're going to be asking for it in the budget?
So for what I projected in terms of what our draft budget is right now, I did put a 2.5% in there.
Okay.
You know, some places are asking for,
That's good.
you know, 7.8%, but I think, you know, kind of keep it in line. We're usually in that range in terms of our cost.
Are you going to be
adjustment.
asking for merit raises for the in conjunction with these and with this pay study?
No, it's just the goal of this study and of the recommended actions is to get people at least to a competitive hiring rate level of what other agencies have. You know, and that's, like I said, not to take into account that, you know, people at these other agencies are making significantly more because they can even be brought in. They have a hiring range. So we're just taking the bottom of the hiring range, but trying to at least get us so that we're competitive at that hiring rate, which I think is a really strong first step. And then if we follow some of the other recommendations of the study with rewarding longevity with that 0.1% each year for years of service to the town, I think that's a good method over time for rewarding longevity. And that's something I know Commissioner Waters and I have talked about before, was looking at longevity. And that was something that we incorporated into the study as well. So I think it's something that gets us moving in that right direction and gets us closer. Obviously, we're never going to be at the top of the range across the county, but my goal is to at least get us to that middle of the pack. So we're reasonably competitive. We're never going to have that kind of income that other communities in this county have, and I recognize that, but I want us to at least be able to compete. So we're about middle of the pack, fourth or fifth, if you're looking at that list of 9 that are in Carter County.
Okay, I got one more question. Everybody here knows that I was against adding that 4th position at Public Works, especially 3 months away from a budget discussions. That said, the $28,000, we created that position for Mike Bishop in name only. Okay. We should have not done what we did, but I agree that the 4 commissioners against 1, that's fine. I can take my losses, but my question now is where's this $28,000 going to be in your budget? I mean, that we had allocated to Mike Bishop for the hybrid position.
Yeah, so right now it's still split out because some of that, so what you generate off of permit fee revenue has to go back into that planning and inspections department. Since Ryan's doing that dual role of code enforcement and public works supervisor, that salary is being split up between that code enforcement, planning and inspections department and public works. So it balances it out. Similar to kind of how Mike was half police, half planning inspections. Ryan's.
So you have no intentions of entertaining or putting in the budget of another hybrid position, sole purpose of zoning or whatever you, like Mike did, part-time cop, if you're lucky enough to find one?
We weren't anticipating doing that. You know, I think, you know, Ryan's getting acclimated to, you know, to doing the code enforcement function. And, you know, I think it's something seems to be working pretty well right now. So we hadn't really put thought towards hiring another, kind of hybrid in that kind of configuration. So
I still just feel like it's a burden to be put on his back to do that. That's just my opinion. So
if there's a desire to do another hybrid kind of police code enforcement type position, we can certainly look at that in the budget if that's, the preference of the board. So
looking forward to seeing you, bud.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I didn't see it in here. All the incentives that are associated with salary increase and all that. If you assume that all this is approved in the budget going forward, how long does it take for these increases to require a tax increase to maintain the status quo?
I don't want to necessarily speculate too much about it without having it all put together.
Well, if
But
that's not a number that we have, that's fine. We obviously put a lot of thought into this pay study.
Mhm.
We need to look at the long-term effects of whatever benefits are that we are considering. So if we can get, before we sit down to talk about budget and actually implementing some of these things, I'd like to know, have some due diligence done about what that looks like into the future.
yeah, and I mean, I've got some rough kind of numbers, but there's a couple more things we need to get information on, like our enterprise fleet program and just figuring out what those exact costs are going to be. But I think if we implement everything that is in here, I would anticipate probably like a cent and a half or so would be probably the tax impact of implementing this pay study. So that would be my guess, just based on the current numbers. But that's subject to change as we get the
On
better
a yearly
idea.
basis?
What's that?
Are you talking about just to implement this? I'm
Just
not
to-
looking
just
for
to
I'm not looking for an answer right now.
Yeah,
What
just
I'm looking for is for y'all to do some due diligence before we sit down and talk about this. So assume outside of whatever it would cost to make this happen.
Mhm.
As these incentives improve, nothing changes. Like that's going to affect how big our budget is. I just want some thought put into that so that we have that information when it comes to make a decision.
Okay. Yeah, I get what you're saying. So I think the first year might be like a penny and a half. And then future years, what I'll do is figure out based on the current staff with this longevity, kind of incentive built into it, figure out what that adds up to each year. And I can give you all a good idea about future budget years, what that might be. What's tricky is as the value of property increases in town, that might be sufficient to offset, that increase. And ideally, that's what will happen is as we get new businesses and additional residents in town, that'll offset any amount of increase that will come along. But the biggest hurdle is that first year to go ahead and implement this, because that gets us caught up and then we're maintaining. And I think that's kind of the goal is if we address it now, then it'll be a lot easier for future years as opposed to just trying to, if we put this off, I mean, I think we're just pushing the problem down the road. So the amount of a tax increase or the budgetary impact of it's going to be much more significant. Not to mention the interim cost of what we might see if we lose a lot of employees, especially in the police department, having to retrain a whole new group of officers and put them through, whether if they're rookies, I mean, they're coming in and they're getting several months on the road just in training. So uniforms, equipping them, I mean, it's a pretty big cost. So it's a little bit of a difficult, calculation to do, but I'll take a stab at it using our current slate of employees and just figure out what that number would be.
I would say that my previous career, I've done several pay studies on community ZAC. There's a lot of work, a lot of effort has gone into this pay study. Of course, I see some numbers that they could be turned a little differently. And I encourage the rest of the board to look at these numbers as well. Chief, you have done that in your past as well. And so have you, Mr. Mayor. let's look at these numbers and see what we can do with them ourselves. So when we do come back together, we can have our own ideas with that. Jot them down. One of the things I did not see in here, Zach, is the part-time salaries, which when you talk about retention, you know, your police department is, well, let's say a team of basketball members is only as good as the bench. You may have five good players out there, but your bench is just as important as your 5 main players. So if we don't pay some officers some good part-time money to help with these officers that's going to court, vacations, schools, whatnot, then you're going to be losing there as well. Plus, for any part-time bench, you may have somebody that you could hire from there as well if you have an opening. So I encourage the rest of us to look at those numbers as well. I do know that some of the part-time salaries have increased tremendously with other departments. For example, I know they're paying, some departments pay at least $25 an hour as we speak, which is quite a big jump from $15 to $16 an hour.
Yeah, and I'll remind the board that you all did increase the part-time salary for the police department up to 18, but like you mentioned, there are right
Yeah,
across the
going up
bridge, they're
there.
making 25 an hour. So I would definitely, I know Chief would as well, welcome looking at
And
those
$18
part-time
an
salaries.
hour is a good hourly rate for a part-time officer. But you talk about retention. Compared to the other departments, what are they? So I don't know what their numbers are. What are they paying their part-time officers?
Yeah, that's something we can get some.
And another question would be is, are they keeping their part-time officers?
At some point, I'd like to speak.
Sir?
At some point, I would like to speak. The rest of the board.
Okay. So with that, and then we talk about the longevity. I mean, I think that is a good benefit to have with all employees of the town, not just law enforcement. And of course, I have some ideas with that. I believe that could help the town as well. And it's not a big impact to the budget itself. It does puts an incentive for the employees, something to look forward to in the coming months. Anyway, Chief.
You want to speak?
Currently, we're down to 3 reserve officers. One says he will not work unless he's working with another officer. I was informed of that this weekend. Well, our department's already small, so that rules him out. Another one went full-time with another agency, and he might be available 5% of the time when we request his assistance. And then there's one more that moved away and unable to work, maybe not even that 5% of the time when we request that. But that's what we're up against. So possibly increasing salaries would increase the desire to come as a part-time officer. I don't know. I can tell you from experience, a lot of officers are burnt out since COVID. That changed the dynamics of everything. But you guys are talking, I'd say you guys respectfully, I say you guys, we're dealing with a dire situation right now, and I'm going to present that. I'm going to keep it simple, the KISS method, but we are dealing with hyperinflation. There was a pay study that was conducted, I believe, in 2016, 15. The pay study came with a good bump at the time, but there was no follow through on the steps that the study presented, which would have almost kept us in line with local salaries at this time. And other departments have left us in the dust because they followed through with the study. You were given paperwork, the cost of hiring new recruits, somewhere between $8,581 to $11,429 to train someone new. That's a great cost to the town. And I want to insert right here that the officers are loyal and They love working here. I will get to that in a minute, but now many agencies, what they're doing, they're pre-hiring and they're sending potential officers to be let, and they're paying their way through. So for many of the others, and I know some of you know this, but a person can go through BLET, but they might not be horrible because of past records. It prevents them from being hired in law enforcement with a background check. And then there's a lot of others that were not pre-hired. They're seeking out more competitive agencies. I've been dealing with an experienced officer that temporarily left his career. Speak with him quite frequently. Today, I saw him again, inform me that he has applied at a neighboring agency that pays more. I like what Miss Beasley, with MAPS, basically, she said that pay gets new hires, but pay doesn't necessarily keep an officer. I'm aware of a neighboring agency that compensates their officers very well, but they lost some of their officers recently to other agencies. So there are other factors why officers do leave. But I can tell you here for a fact that most of the dissatisfaction is with the pay. And I'm being very frank with the board tonight. And also will say with that, and speaking with recently with another chief, that it's not limited to our agency. So we're not just pinpointing Cape Carteret. Having already fallen behind in pay and with the hyperinflation in play, officers, they're just simply not able to keep up with their expenses. One of my best officers' rent just jumped 35.5%, and his car insurance went up 46%. Some of these officers have additional pay, and so that allows them to remain with our agency. 3 of the officers are single parents, so they're paying for their siblings and for their children and their needs. I just simply don't want to watch the town lose some of the best officers to other departments, but that's what it's coming down to. I work with them every day, and I see what goes on. I rub shoulders with them. And finally, the bottom line was best said by Miss Beasley with MAPS. The market determines the value of a profession, whatever that be, a meter reader or officer. The question is not whether the employee should be paid that amount, but how many employees can that entity afford? So we need to take a look at that. And I can tell you that I can see right now the potential, if there's not some action taken, I can see at least 3 officers departing from our agency. And I have been beating the bushes down trying to find replacements. There was a time when agencies could choose the officers they wanted to work for them. Now officers can choose the agency they want to work for. So times have changed, and that's where we're at. Thank you. Yes, sir.
I feel very important here. Where's the nearest law enforcement officer training facility?
Well, that would be Morehead City. Are you asking for?
Where is the nearest facility that trains new officers?
That would be Morehead City or Jacksonville, about the same distance.
Is that, who controls that training? Is it county?
No, sir.
State? In Morehead, okay. Did the officers that have left, did they specifically state it was because of higher pay, chief?
Because of where one officer went to, I cannot say that was specifically the reason he left. I think he did get a bump in salary, but it was also in his hometown. So
that was the Newport. Okay. How many officers do you have now?
Well, there's 6 full-time officers plus myself, and that one officer is one of the 3 of our reserves.
Is one of them the SRO?
Yes, sir.
So you're down one.
We only have 5 officers to work.
Okay.
We have just a good example this weekend. We had emergency. We had Officer Garrett's father passed away. And so Saturday, I dressed up and came in, and I did find one of my other officers. Actually, the SRO came in and took my place and worked Saturday and yesterday. And so therefore created more overtime because we simply don't have people to fill in.
Well, like you stated, it's not just our department. It's all over the country. But why haven't we been asked until now?
I think the hyperinflation that has raised its ugly head, I think officers were hanging on and they were making it, but just as the one example I gave, those type of increases, when I say, I know that I purposely set percentages, but rent increased $300 a month, and it would have increased more if he would not have agreed to sign a 15-month lease for the place.
Mm-hmm.
So it would have actually been more than that. And he said, I've had no traffic infractions and no reasons for a price increase, but my auto insurance has gone up, what did I say, 46, 47%.
All of our insurances have gone up.
Correct.
I got one more statement I'd like to make, Chief, and I think I told you this when we'll tell the board this. I don't know if y'all guys pay any attention to the county board of commissioners meeting, but Commissioner Calmer has started spearheading the effort because of pressure put on him by yours truly and some others, to staff to budget for deputy sheriffs. Not going to help you much now, but maybe it'll cut some of this mutual aid off of your shoulders in the future. So they're going to try to budget 4 officers for the western part of the county. So, but I agree with everything you said, Chief.
Yeah, that's a good thing. It doesn't solve some of the issues that some of our officers are having financially. So I just needed to give you the nuts and bolts of what's going on. It concerns me greatly. These officers are professionals. We make sure that we can get them in every training program we can when possible. And we push them to do that. And it's at the sacrifice of other officers that sometimes these guys go to training, and there's a lot of shifting around and filling in. Even if it means that I have to come in and work, then we're going to get it done. But it does place a burden on the officers. And all of them, 100%, said they would prefer a salary increase versus an 8th person, because it's become very evident that the financial struggles are real. Yes, sir.
Chief, I have something I want to ask you. Have you been attending the chief's meetings last several months? Have they discussed within those meetings pertaining to personnel? And what has the discussion been about, and what have they come up with?
Well, personnel in every department, they're lacking officers. And what's happening is officers, a department might get fully staffed, but it's not long before they lose someone else to another department that's not fully staffed. So there's a lot of transferring from department to department because all the departments are in need. And again, some of the applicants, they're just not hireable because of their history.
Of course, we do know that the BLAT schools have not been receiving the applications
Yes.
as they have in the past. I believe I understood it was down like 35 to 40% of applications for the BLAT program. And that being said, like you said earlier, is now these folks are choosing where they want to go. And of course, also some of these applications, folks that put in these applications don't have the good enough history to become a police officer. We all know that. So have you talked to the other department heads pertaining to their officers willing to work part-time in these other departments?
I will do that. I have not, in the chiefs meeting, I have not. I have mentioned it to two other chiefs. They seem to be lacking officers to work part-time for their agencies. And the problem that they have is that for some reason, there's officers that have full-time positions. They're just not seeking out additional work. I think that, again, it goes back, I believe it started 2.5, 3 years ago with COVID, and it's just burned a lot of the officers out in this profession. So that's where we're at with the issues that we're facing. I did place the paper that I received today, and it gives you some of the statistics from the recent study on recruitment and retention and some of the issues we're facing. The front page says it all, and it speaks clearly what's going on. There's many more leaving the profession than are coming in. They're actually trying to figure out a way to resolve this issue. It is an issue.
Let me ask you one more question, and I'll leave you alone. Do you feel like if the part-time salary was increased significantly, we'd be able to obtain some officers to assist you with your absentees?
I do. And we're seeing salaries from $21 to $25 an hour for part-time. And in that same breath, I would say that we're not going to have even BLEC graduates that are going to be attracted to our agency until we get in line with the hiring salaries. They're just not going to choose to come here. And I don't want us to be, as Zach put in the very detailed study, we don't want to be a training facility. The officers want to stay here. They want to work here. I've never regretted coming here. That's where we're at.
Oh, you sure can.
Just, I think the consensus is, I think we're all on the same page, I mean, we need to consider it at least. And it doesn't hurt to talk about it, and that's what we're going to be doing, is talking about the budget. So I would say include the numbers, and your job is to do what you think is best for the town. It's the job of this board to either follow up on that or to change it, to augment it to what the board's pleasure is. So thank you for bringing up that information. Now it's up to us to do our job at these meetings. And while we're on the subject, a date for the meeting, I think you threw around, because I know Commissioner Martin's gonna be out of town. You had something.
You said May 9th and do a hybrid meeting.
We could do that if everybody's agreed to it. We got a board meeting on the 9th anyway. We could meet a couple hours early.
Same day as the board meeting, does that work?
Yes. They're fine with everybody on the 9th?
Yes.
Yes. 4 o'clock. Everybody okay with that? You're gonna be here anyway.
I'll make it happen.
You okay with that?
I'll make it happen.
Okay, so let's do that tentative.
Yeah, I think we've got it pretty close right now. Want to get the enterprise information, and we'll get it out. So
I do not envy you, sir. All right, next up is the discussion of the culvert cleaner equipment.
all right, so as I mentioned earlier, the Public Works Department's been demoing 2 different pieces of equipment. And rather than read through the whole memo, I'll kind of just summarize, what our thoughts have been on that. They've been trying out an FX20B ditch witch unit, which was quoted at $26,500.04. And then also a piece of jetting equipment that was quoted at $78,249.07. So they tried out this equipment throughout the town. We were fortunate and really appreciate Ditch Witch letting the Public Works Department try it out for several weeks and give them a really good opportunity to try the equipment out and get a feel for it. And then the gentleman from, I believe it's from Cary, came down with the jetting machine and demonstrated that jetting machine on several runs of pipes throughout the town. And then Ryan also headed down to Holly Ridge and met with their Public Works department down there and was able to see some of their equipment and talk with them about their experience. And in that process, we also looked into the possibility of, rather than purchasing the equipment outright, looking into renting this equipment. So based on the speed that Public Works was able to get through the town and hit all the culvert boxes and runs of pipe, we feel it would be cost effective to rent this equipment as needed, either on an annual or biannual basis, which would be a more cost efficient solution based on the amount of piping we have in town, the number of boxes we have in town. And this would be something that would also free up space over at Public Works. If the preference was to purchase one piece of equipment, we would recommend the FX20B Ditch Witch for $26,500. The advantage to having that on hand is if one of the boxes got clogged up from a storm and we needed to get sediment out of that box, or if there was a particular driveway pipe that needed to be addressed, we'd be able to immediately get out there and mobilize with that piece of equipment. But for the majority of circumstances, we could probably plan ahead and clean these pipes out and be able to get in and do the boxes either on an annual or biannual basis, which would probably be sufficient. So a couple different options. We could purchase both pieces of equipment. That would come out to $104,749.11. Could purchase the Ditch Witch for that $26,500, and the jetting machine could be leased at that $1,250 per week. Or we could just go for the renting both pieces of equipment. The Ditch Witch, for a little bit more substantial Ditch Witch that was available for rent, was $2,100 per week, and then that jetting machine was $1,250. And there's a number of different dealerships around, or rental places around, that rent this equipment out. Another possibility might be to work with one of the other municipalities that has this equipment. And based on their feedback, they were able to get through their municipality in about, a week or two. And then the equipment kind of just sits the rest of the year. So there's a really good possibility maybe we enter into an MOU with that municipality where we, reimburse them, at a fair kind of market rate, are able to utilize their equipment and bring it back to them. So that's something that I know Ryan was going to look into a little bit and see if that was a possibility. So, so those are kind of the different options that are out there. I think Public Works did a great job really getting a good feel for it. They covered a lot of the piping system throughout the town. I think just about all the culvert boxes in town and several of those long runs of pipe. And something to think about in terms of frequency is that, a lot of these pipes, to our knowledge, have never been jetted, and a lot of these boxes have never been cleaned out. Some of those might be 30 or 40 years old. So the frequency at which it actually has to occur, I'm not even sure if it has to be an annual kind of thing, because we went 30, 40 years before without doing that. So it might be one of those things. Public Works evaluates the condition of the boxes and makes a determination. Do we need to get in there, rent a piece of equipment, clean it out? And that might be every couple of years. But now that it's done for the most part, I think we're in a really good position going into the hurricane season, and glad we were able to do this at this time of the year. And something to think about moving forward would be maybe each spring we kind of make this a project where we walk off 2 or 3 weeks, try to jet everything in town and try to get into the boxes and just rent the equipment to do that. But I think that'd be the staff's recommendation. That would allow us to use some of those ARP funds, which I believe is what we were talking about for this particular item. We could use that for actual infrastructure. We have several grant applications we've put in for the BRIC grant. We recently put in for a state grant, which would pay for all the engineering, permitting, and design for all of these projects. And there's another grant opportunity that I'm putting in for the next couple of weeks. So, hopefully some of those come to fruition. And, if they do, we should start to hear some stuff back around the June timeframe. And we can leverage some of these funds in addition to that funding that hopefully comes in for those grant sources and tackle the majority of the stormwater issues throughout the town. So I'm pretty optimistic on that, and hopefully some of those work out. So, but those are kind of our thoughts on it. So our requested action would be for the board to provide direction to the staff if there's an interest in purchasing one of the pieces of equipment, both of the pieces of equipment, or just going with the rental or MOU route with another municipality. That's the direction we would be seeking.
Got a question for you, Zach. It says that that it would take 1 to 2 months to complete a iteration of this in here, right?
Yeah, if we were to go in and do all of the pipes under driveways, that would be more involved than hitting the main stormwater infrastructure.
And that would only have to happen once or twice a year.
If that, I mean, it's probably not been done since when the fire department used to come in and they used to provide, their truck and they would blow out this pipe. So that's probably been maybe 10 years now or somewhere, 7 to 10 years, something like that. So
what would that require? Which piece of equipment would that require? Both of them or just the one?
We could probably do that with the jetting machine.
Right.
You got to suck it
So-
up all the way.
So that process takes if that takes 2 months to do, it's $26,000 and some change, right? So I mean, we do that. No. I'm talking about to rent that equipment. It's $26,000 to rent that equipment for 2 months.
Yes, if we wanted to do every one of the driveway culverts in town, and there's pros and cons to doing that. If we go in there is a chance, and we just have to be prepared that if we do some of these culvert pipes into the driveways, we're probably going to end up replacing those culvert pipes. So we definitely want to have some pipes on hand to be able to replace them, and just kind of factor that into that project. Just because some of them are in pretty rough shape.
They're also in our right of way.
Yeah, so
we don't get to like have the right of way and then like walk away from it. They're in our right of way. So
yeah, it would just be a cost we need to budget for.
oh, I'm sorry, one more question before I let you go. Why the upsize for the rental? So if the 25 is the right answer, why was that not the one that we got the quote for?
That was just the one that we were able to locate when we were looking at the closest available rentals. And that one would have, I think it had a 500-gallon tank on that rental. So we would have to take a lot less trips back to Public Works when we were doing that. They could hit a number of locations and not have to go back as frequently to dump the tank on that.
Grand box out and from back to the shop, drain the tank. This one you could probably, majority of it, like we were talking about too, it has been done for 20, 30 years. The boxes were terrible. Bad. Now that we got initial cleanup on, it's just, we got to keep on. See, we're going to need to do this every year. Not done.
So if we were to buy that particular piece of equipment, would we want the 25 or would we want the 20?
If we own it in town, I believe we have it. If it wouldn't be that much, we could do a smaller one.
Okay.
But that
Just
should be more cost effective.
Okay.
We could use it more frequently. If we have it, we'll use it as an as-needed basis. Right there, our shop right there, we can put the free tank.
And did the reps give y'all an annual rough estimate on annual maintenance?
I did not.
Did you know anything about maintenance numbers on this?
No,
One's a
Ron was.
diesel engine for the jetting machine, the regular Kohler engine. If it is ditch witch material product, yes, we do have a service station that does ditch witch maintenance in Jacksonville. Ditch witch has been great with us too. We still have it at our shop. Let us borrow it for the past 6 weeks, I think. For example, too, we've only put, it's a brand new machine, we let us demo it. If you look it up, I think we only put probably 7.5 hours on it. And that's with the time we've had it for about 6 weeks now. Put that in perspective. But as far as the ditch witch machine, yes, it is a nationwide company. There's ways to get maintained. The jetting machine, not so all constant.
Zach, as far as the comment about renting it may be the best way to go because it is set there for the rest of the year. I'd like to point out that you got two massive water pumps that you purchased for 20 grand a few years ago. To my knowledge, haven't been used in a year or two, unless there's a huge rain event. Leaf and limb truck sits there for most time of the year, the paving packer. So honestly, I mean, that's not fair to compare that, but we got to face the fact that now is the opportune time to purchase this equipment because this ARP funding is going to run out. Then to rent the equipment, it becomes a budget line item year after year after year after year. Follow what I'm saying? So it's always better, in my opinion, to own it, especially when we have this money. It's going to run out and we need to use it for the benefit of the citizens. And I can't think of a better thing to do than to clean these culverts out. And it's our responsibility to maintain the water flow on these ditches. It's our right of way. So be it if a culvert is impacted, it's our job, it's our responsibility. If the vote passes to rent instead of buy, could you tell me when Public Works would start the process?
Elaborate a little bit on, what do you mean by start the process? On the culverts?
If the board votes to rent instead of buy the equipment, when would the Public Works start cleaning driveway culverts out?
Yeah, and I mean, I might defer to Ryan in terms of their scheduled timeframe, but you know, I don't see, you know.
Now it's known season, but realistically, I try to plan for spring and fall, more so probably before hurricane season. Another thing to consider too, when I was working with the jetting machine, it's a 750 gallon tank, I believe. I got the specs on it. I don't know off the top of my head, but filling it up with a garden hose take you
a while.
Take a while. So you have them filling up from fire hydrants. I called them to fill it up, and I got burned, and we had to go to the water company to go Newport. So to keep that in mind, plus it's 30 gallons per minute machine. So keep that in mind, it's a 700 gallon tank, and it's 30 gallons per minute. You're going to be running out of water if you're running full speed in about 20 minutes. You have to do that process all day.
Well, you got to figure out the.
It would be nice if we had a 2-inch tap over at the Public Works. Fill that with the.
Well, that was another situation where we cleaned out 2 pipes, or the one on Sutton Drive, and did a couple of driveway culverts on Bay Shore, and that flew through that tank like that.
Right. When you were out here demoing the machines, did you demo the most serious, where we had most issues with?
Yeah. Well, the jet machine did 2 pipes in 1 tank of it. Big point when we got set up with him. He couldn't leave that machine with us. So I hit the most damaged culverts that I've seen stuffed up with debris on Bay Shore Drive. Ditch on Bay Shore Drive.
Okay.
Industry holds water, and I'm trying to come up with a solution to that. It's been ongoing. So we did hit those 2 driveway culverts in Sutton Drive. And, that's the 2 pipes we got the jetting machine on. We had this ditch, which I hit all the boxes in town with the brand boxes, and I was trying to.
You see you hit all of them? You see you hit all of them?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. So you've got about 7 hours of work into all the boxes already. So you're basically good for another year to 2 years on the boxes.
Yeah,
If not longer, right?
Yeah, they haven't been doing it. Sediment, leaves, debris. Some of them weren't terrible that bad.
Okay.
But a handful of them were bad. They're filled up.
But now they're clean.
Yeah. But now you're getting into stormwater pipes, long runs of pipes. You can't get into using more to a jet machine.
Okay.
And so another municipality, public works director there, they told me that, hey, I have money to buy this, and it's here. I'm going to try to jet it out or stormwater.
So, but basically, once you get the work done, which take you probably rest about 24 hours total,
Yeah.
the job would be done for Cape Carteret for a long period of time. So the machine would sit there for a long period of time, when you can rent it, when you need it. Okay.
That's why if we were going to go to purchasing something,
thank you for the work you've done with it, bud. We appreciate it.
They're both great pieces of equipment.
Now, with the jet machine, do you use a penetrating nozzle for that, or do you have the, what they call the culvert puller? Like a
Shoots one forward and
three back, right? That's penetrating.
It's a large volume of water.
Yeah.
Down
Yeah.
It's a lot of water. Just send it, just it clears out. It does. Fill it up, it did its job.
So you need more water supply.
For the jet, yeah. It doesn't have an attachment for it to hook up to a hydrant.
Yeah, but you have to go to the water company to fill it up?
Yeah. There was one right there on Lake Road, called the fire department.
So can we get some kind of tap or something for this facility over there to accommodate?
Imagine, so I can look into that.
Okay.
Yeah, we need a 2-inch tap, and then what you do is you have the 2.5-inch standard fire hydrant nozzle off it, and they make those. They're called yard hydrants. And so you just put that out there, and that would work. I'm not sure what the cost is for the tap.
We factored in the fact that rent, I mean, Chief was talking about rent for a house over here for one of his officers, but have we factored in rent into some of these, into our calculus about how machinery is going through the roof, and you can't buy a $2,500 pickup truck, much less.
Well, that's another issue is what's the wait time on the machines?
The one that we demoed was the demo machine. That is for sale. Other ones, I think they were good, 8 to a year.
So if we bought that ditch witch, it just stayed where it's at. And we don't have a timeline on the other one. It's just something for the board to consider while we're thinking about this. Just because we can rent them right now, or we can buy them right now, doesn't necessarily mean either we can get them right now or that we will be able to change our mind later and get them. They may not be available for rent. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, but go try to buy a heavy duty pickup truck right now. Can't do it. So just food for thought.
The last option you had, where you said there was a potential opportunity to work with another municipality, is that something that has even been looked into? Have we talked to any other particular municipality?
Yes.
And what kind of cost would be involved if we were to go that route?
Yes, the one we were referencing was potentially, that might be premature to say which municipality it was, but I don't know if Ron's had that conversation yet or not. I want Brad to put it in the paper about. But I think it's a good possibility. I mean, I think it would be mutually beneficial. I mean, pay them accordingly, and they would get some income that they could use towards maintaining and all that on the equipment. So,
Would we still go in and buy both pieces and go half on if we split it with another municipality?
So what we're talking about is one that already has, I believe they have a ditch witch and they have a jetting machine, correct?
They have the same which they actually had it on site. That job. See it. But I spoke with them about it Vermeer back in next year.
So they already have the equipment. We'd just be seeing if there's the potential we could enter into an MOU to be able to utilize
So we
that.
would rent it. from
Yes,
them,
rent that from them. So
which helps with your supply issue.
and there might be some potential, with other municipalities in our immediate area as well too, and I did have a little bit of a conversation with their neighbors across the bridge. So there may be some interest there in the future. But I think there's some options we could definitely look at. And I think those would work out well, especially working with another municipality. Just draft up an MOU and specify terms and all that. So.
Any more comments, questions? All right,
advantage of the ARP funding we have at this time and buy it. Use it on the benefit of the citizens.
All right, we have a motion, have a second.
Is that just for clarification, is that both pieces of equipment? Yes, both pieces. of
Yeah, he said both.
I'll second that.
All right. Any discussion on the motion?
That is what ARP funding.
Do we know how much of the flooding that we experienced is solely attributed to clogged culverts and boxes?
The only location that I think we can directly attribute to a clog in the system was the Sutton Drive flooding. I think that's the only one that I know of that's definitively tied to that, but that one also has other factors in play with topography and some other things, and just where there's not infrastructure in place. Other places, it's a little bit harder to tell. Hopefully that's something, if some of these grants come to fruition, also with the Resilient Coastal Communities Program, phase 3 and 4 of that is studying, all of these locations where we have this significant flooding that occurs on a repeat basis. And that'll tell us, is it the sizing of the infrastructure that's in place? Is it clogs of that infrastructure? Or is it just a lack of infrastructure where there's no stormwater pipes or the ditch size is insufficient? Because it could be any number of those factors or a combination of those factors. But, the only place I know of where there's actually a clog was at that Sutton Drive flooding location. And that was in that June 2020 storm event. And clogbusters came out and cleared that pipe that's under the golf course and restored flow into the golf course. But I do think there's still some sediment and debris that's in that pipe under the golf course. So that being privately maintained, that wasn't one we could get to, but that would be a good one to get cleared out. But other than that, I don't know of any that are specific, flooding due to an obstruction. I think it's more so there's not the infrastructure in place, or the system is not fully connected like it should be, and that's something that, we put in for multiple different grant funding sources. And I think once we get, an engineering team in here that is able to study that, we'll have a better idea about specifically, what the cause of the flooding is. A lot of it is topography though. And there's not sufficient infrastructure to align with that topography. So you have houses that are sitting lower than the elevation of the road, are lower than the elevation of surrounding properties, and all the water pools there. And there's not stormwater infrastructure to bring the stormwater out of there. And that's one of those things that it's going to take. I mean, that's piping and culverts and digging ditches and bioretention facilities to be able to fix that. It's not necessarily something we would be able to fix with a specific piece of equipment. So that's kind of.
Yeah. So I think for me, I think this is, I'm all about spending money on stormwater, but to me, we're sort of making this solution. We're trying to create a problem for it to fit, and it just seems somewhat anecdotal. So I think for me, I don't think I can support this. I mean, if you said that, we had the majority of our storm, water infrastructure was clogged, and yes, and certainly it helps in the preventative maintenance world, but then I would definitely support it. But I just don't. I think this funding should go to the problem, and I don't think that we're solving the problem by buying this equipment. I think renting would be good. If we want to look at it again in a year or two after we've rented this and done this consistently, maybe so. But I think for me, that's why I don't support this for right now.
Ryan, I just have a question. As a public works director who has had the opportunity to work with these machines, seeing what is out there that need to be done that need to be fixed, repaired, whatever, is your recommendation is rental or purchase?
Just that one visit down there, even for the ditch witch that we have here, that we put 8 hours on it, garage. Or you could use the ARP funds to go in there and actually fix the situation itself with the pipes that are damaged. Another thing I forgot to mention with the guy that was demoing the jetting machine, he was a little kind of nervous about jetting out some, going into the Sutton Drive pipe. It wasn't okay, but anything that's brittle at all, he was worried about damaging it. So because he came with his machine to demo it out. So there is a chance of even damaging older pipes with the machine with such power.
Sure. Thank you.
Zach, if you run a light in there, ever call it in this action?
No, we've not run a light into every culvert in the
I
town.
invite you to come to Bayshore one day when you got anything else. I'll show you plenty of clogged up culvert pipes.
We do have a piece of equipment, like we've rigged up something with a GoPro and a pole that we can get into the culvert runs that are underneath driveways, and we get a really clear picture. It's got a light on the front and a light on the back. We can actually run it through the whole length, or determine if we've got an obstruction. What we could do, if we go the rental route and if we have a list of driveway culverts, we can kind of keep up with that like we do with other things. And then when we have that equipment, those are the driveway culverts we can target first, and get those addressed. So that would be something kind of to think about on that. And that's something that we are able to get in there for at least the length of the driveway culverts that are underneath driveways, and we can scope those fairly well and get a very good picture quality of what the obstruction is there a break in the pipe or something else. So that is within our capability. The long runs of pipe, we would probably need to hire like a firm that comes in and scopes those pipes for something that's like a 300-foot long run or something like that. I would recommend we probably need to get somebody in here, but that will probably be a component of some of these grants if they're awarded, is studying the existing infrastructure, sizing that infrastructure, and determining if there are existing deficiencies in that infrastructure.
This is not an either or decision. This is not the entire ARP budget.
Yeah.
And once even if the engineer comes in there and says we can fix the low-lying areas with infrastructure, that infrastructure has to dump in to the infrastructure we're talking about keeping clean.
But the reality of it is, it's not a blank check. There is some, finiteness to the ARP budget. And
no, you're right.
We really don't know what the stormwater solution is going to be. And it just seems premature to buy something like this when we really haven't spent the money on fixing a problem.
We do know that most towns, and Mayor Baker worked for a municipality for many years, and probably have normal maintenance that includes cleaning culverts out.
Which we will still be able to do if we rent one.
There's two pieces of equipment too.
I will say this again, if you decide to rent, every year, there's gonna be a budget line. It's at what, $20-some thousand, Charlie? When we have the ARP funds that were given to us to use for this kind of stuff, I think it'd be foolish to not take advantage of it. So what if it sets 10 months out of the year, most of the equipment over there? It's our duty to keep these culverts open. And to make the statement that there's only one culvert clogged up in this town on Sutton Place is not true.
Just for clarification, I mean, maybe a technicality, but difference between a culvert or a driveway culvert and a long run of pipe.
Culvert's a culvert.
But there's one long run of pipe that there was a clog in. There might be driveway pipes that have collapsed over the years, or that might be obstructed. And, if you've got specific ones in mind, we can certainly run the camera through there and determine which ones those are. But I will say, something to think about is if none of these grants pan out that we put in for, the benefit of having these ARP funds there is that we could use that for actual infrastructure and put it in, putting infrastructure in place to address these issues. That would be the advantage, is that this is kind of if none of those grants pan out, we would have a funding source to be able to do this. And that's kind of the thought process, is that, if none of those come to fruition, I mean, the BRIC grant is a national competition for those funds. And I don't know what our prospects are on that, but that's why we're putting in for as many grants as possible, because hopefully one works out. But at the end of the day, if none of those work out, this could be useful funding for infrastructure and actually putting in piping and culvert boxes. And some of that could even be done in-house with the Public Works Department. Some of it will have to be contracted out. So
How much?
I'm gonna try to put in there, there's two of them, the ditch which you can specifically target more driveway culverts, pressure washer and pond. You can't get into the longer runs of pipes with that. I'm saying it could be, that ditch which could be used for driveways, but it can't be used for long runs of pipe. That's where the jet machine comes in. The long runs of pipe, you can't do the driveway culverts too, which is a little extreme.
You know, the driveway.
Yeah. That's why I said there's two different machines in front. He's buying one, renting another.
So I'm not going to speculate fully on all of our stormwater issues, but I do know that at least over here in Old Cape Coral Red, a lot of our stormwater issues are like you talk about. We have little bowls out there that fill up with water, and that's fine. And yes, infrastructure can fix that, but we as a town cannot pay to put infrastructure on private property. Correct me if I'm wrong. We can't use public funds on private property.
Not unless it serves a public purpose, right?
So it's a hard argument to make that his yard being flooded is a public purpose, in my opinion. But what we're talking about is affecting the things that we actually can. So that's the last I'm gonna say on it.
Just buying that machine to do the driveways, or what is the price, Zach, 26,000? I can retract my motion and make a motion just to buy that one machine. If Zach's saying the long run culverts are clean or whatever, I'll retract my motion, just make a motion to buy the one machine. Because by the time you rent that machine, Charlie Morgan pointed out, you could buy it.
Now what, I'm sorry, but the machine you were using was a used one. Do you say that's the ones for sale that we could get now? The vacuum. Was that the price for the used machine, or was that actually going to be cheaper? Okay. For the used one, okay.
But Ron, you're saying, what you're telling me though, what you've witnessed and seen out here, it's not as bad as what it tends to be, and what was bad, you took care of.
Yes.
And we haven't really investigated it with other municipality, like we haven't talked to them. You don't have to say who it is, but I mean, we don't really know what those.
there could be an opportunity to,
I would like to know what that opportunity is. While we know what it's going to cost us just to go out and rent a machine, we don't know what that cost would be if, and I don't know what municipality we're talking about. We're talking about Swansboro, Emerald Isle, who, I don't know if you got, who you've got in mind. But if there's somebody with that machine that does have it just sitting there for 10, 11 months out of the year that might be willing to go into it, I'd like to know what the cost would be there. It may not be anywhere near what we would pay just to go out and rent it from a company.
Yeah, that's something Ron and I can get up. You can get up with the Public Works director there, and I can get up with the town manager and see if we can work out an MOU. And then we can come back to the next month's meeting with that information as well to kind of aid in the consideration of the options.
I mean, I would not support going out and renting it for in a year or two of renting it, we basically paid for it. If we were going to do that, I would say, no, let's buy the equipment. But if there's a considerable difference in the cost of doing it that way, I'd like to know what that is before we just jump out and buy something that may not need.
I remind the board, if we borrow something and it breaks, we're responsible. That's the way it is.
If we buy something and it breaks, we're responsible for it.
I understand that, but it's ours.
The one thing that concerns me is that buying a piece of equipment and it sits up 10, 12 months, it deteriorates. Then you can buy parts to fix it. Like, been other implementations that's been over at Public Works that we've had to maintain because it was not being used.
Do we have space to put them inside? because the jet machine can't sit outside during the winter.
A little bit of costume over there.
All right, we still have a motion. Any more discussion? So the motion and the second is to purchase the two pieces of equipment. So all in favor?
Wait, did he modify his motion officially?
I was going to try, but,
Can I do that?
I think it'd be easier just for Heather if we go ahead and vote on this motion, and then if you have
can
another
make
motion.
Another motion.
Right.
if you like. Okay. All right, so all in favor of purchasing both pieces of equipment?
Well, since I made the motion, I guess I can say yes. I know it's gonna fail, but, and then I'm gonna make another
We
motion.
have to vote. You have to vote, Joe. Anyway, so all in favor? All opposed? All right, so that failed. Would you like to make another motion?
Yes, I do. To buy the, what do you refer to it as?
The vacuum, trailer vac.
For 26,000, which would serve the purpose for driveways. Okay, that's the motion.
Okay, so I have a second. Any discussion on that? All right, all in favor of just purchasing the trailer vac? All right, that's 2-4, all against? It's 3 against. All right, so Zach, I would suggest that if we could, as Commissioner Don has just implied about as far as anything else from another town to come back, and maybe we revisit this, we may change our mind after that information and decide to purchase it next month with that information. But I think we have more to go on as far as that. It might change some minds.
Yeah, and we'll
So
come
could
back.
you see if that's the, I don't think you would have to disclose the town at that time, but you could get the information so we don't put anybody in an awkward position.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we talk to that town before it
Right.
ends up in the newspaper that we're talking about them when we haven't had a chance.
And also whatever contract agreement would be with that. And another, sorry, I hate to throw all this on you, but also with the cost of a 2-inch tap at the Public Works, we may want to go ahead and get that anyway for future. Even if we're renting, we're still going to need to have the ability to fill that machine up in a timely manner.
And if it looks like it's something we can move forward on with an MOU with a other municipality, we can draft an MOU and bring it at the May meeting for consideration if it's something they're open to, which would be ideal. So I think it would be something, it would seem like a win-win, but we will look into it further.
All righty. Thank you. All right, next up is the discussion of Neptune Court engineering and surveying work.
All right, so this is something that has been on our radar for a while. It's gotten in the process of clearing out the culverts throughout the town and the boxes. This was something that Ryan had brought to my attention as it looked like it's starting to get worse in terms of the 2 boxes on either side of Neptune Court. We were hoping to be able to put that in as part of the brick grant process. That's one of our locations that's part of that grant. Also through the Resilient Coastal Communities Program, we're hoping to put it in through that grant, but some of these grants are the soonest they're going to be in June. The Resilient Coastal Communities Program, that's probably not going to be till the fall. So just being cognizant we're going into a season with heavier rainfall and the potential for hurricanes. I think this is something we'd want to tackle now and address that because it has continued to get worse. Those boxes on either side of the road have settled more than they had at the previous analysis. And I talked with John Freshwater about what the preliminary cost might be on doing the engineering and surveying and permitting for the project. And he was thinking somewhere around $7,500 to study that whole system there and to get a plan together on the replacement. One of the issues, it starts, I believe that's a sound view, is where the run starts. in
I
the,
have it on that.
and it's kind of a strange configuration because there's a pipe that runs north along Neptune Court, and then there's a ditch over top of the pipe, but it's a shallow ditch that isn't really sufficiently sized to handle the surface water. So it's a weird kind of setup. And then those two boxes evidently weren't packed in there quite right because they've shifted around either from sand or from loose sediment underneath. So what we get is a lot of sheet flow coming down Neptune Court during a heavy rainfall, and they create kind of a vortex action that erodes the roadway there. And that being a one-way in, one-way out street, you know, the concern is that we've had a couple of near compromises of the road. We're concerned that if we get a major storm event where we might have a catastrophic failure and have to close that road for some period of time until we can pack in enough dirt to get it reopened. So looking at, you know, performing this work utilizing those American Rescue Plan funds that are already in the budget, would just be asking for permission to utilize those funds for that purpose. We have 7 main locations that are serious flooding locations in the town, and this is one of those 7 locations. However, this one has continued to, I guess, escalate in terms of the significance of the potential of a road washout at that location. So going into hurricane season, we'd like to go ahead and kickstart getting the engineering, surveying, and permitting done. And then if one of these grants does come about, we could always use those grant funds towards the actual construction side. If none of the grants come about, we can use some of that American Rescue Plan funds to fix what's out there. So just wanted to try to accelerate this particular location because we have concern about how much those boxes are shifting. And I think both boxes will probably end up either having to be reset or replaced, and then retie the connections in. Need to check to make sure the pipes are sufficiently sized, and then also try to figure out, because a lot of times water sits stagnant in that ditch because it's not properly graded. You know, if we need to do some regrading on that ditch, or if we just need to add additional drops along that run. So a couple different things we need to look at, but flooding typically starts at the intersection of Neptune Court and Neptune Drive. It goes from there all the way to about where the pipe crosses Neptune Court. So that's something we want to make sure we're taking a look at. I think it's pressing enough that we hop on that and at least start on the engineering, surveying, and permitting. And the other pressing area would be the Sutton Drive project. But the golf course is working with Tidewater Engineering on that, and I did get an update that they had completed the surveying on that project, and he was hoping to get a preliminary analysis put together in the near future on that one. So since that one's progressing, that would be the other most pressing one, I think. So that's good that we're kind of tackling the two most pressing issues if we're able to move forward on this Neptune Court item.
Did he give you a time frame of when he could get this done for Neptune Court?
He did. I responded to him and asked him if he could give me a definitive date, because there is a grant that I think would cover that project there that would be sufficient to be able to address that. And it would be a really good candidate, I think, for that grant, but I need that engineering data to be able to incorporate that in the grant application. So, you know, if there's anything the golf course can do to help accelerate that timeline, it'd be, you know, really appreciated. And I think it would be mutually beneficial because we can put in, you know, for that grant and meet that grant deadline. I think there's a big opportunity there, especially given the level of flooding and the number of properties impacted. So.
All righty.
So yeah, the requested action would just be to authorize town staff to proceed with the engineering, surveying, and permitting using those ARP funds that are already in the budget, so that we can go ahead and get started on this particular project location.
I'd like to make the motion to approve.
All right, second conversation.
We have 7 locations identified. Why are we not wanting to get engineering done on 7 locations?
So we could move forward and do an engineering and design and all that on all 7 locations. We did put in for a grant application that would pay for all of that work to be done. It was somewhere around, between $400,000 to $500,000 would be the cost. So it would exceed what we have in American Rescue Plan funds to do all the project locations. So what we've done is prioritize which ones, in this instance, it has the potential to compromise the road and wash out the road. So that's obviously a concern, you know, and that sediment could wash into the canal there and also, you know, kind of show up in the canal, and then we'd have that issue as well. So try to tackle the most pressing one, and then the other most pressing being the Sutton Drive issues. And since there's already an engineer working on that, we're kind of advancing the two most critical projects. The Arden Oaks stormwater situation is a little bit more complex, and that one involves mostly private property, so that's going to be a little bit more challenging, and that's definitely going to take, I think, a sufficient or substantial amount of funds for an engineering firm to figure out exactly how to address that situation there. So
I'm gonna be critical, Zach. I think you're putting too much confidence and faith in getting these grants, and meanwhile, we're sitting here waiting on our yearly spring rain events when we could, just like Commissioner Morgan said, we should have been using this $300,000 ARP fund to prioritize, but identify, engineer, take ownership of it and fund it and get something done. Procrastination is the worst in this government I've ever seen in my life. But it's about time this issue here was put to bed. This thing's been going on since Commissioner Mark Parrish was sitting up here, for God's sake. But it's been kicked down the road, and now we're having potential catastrophic failure that may close the road. And now we got to wait on Mr. Freshwater to engineer it. It don't get any worse. I think this board needs to provide direction to the town manager based on prioritization of some of these things, as Commissioner Morgan alluded to, and get something done. The worst thing we do is nothing. And to sit and wait, we're going to get a grant. We're going to get a grant. I mean, we can't rely on these grants, especially with inflation hitting the whole entire country. But I'm for doing anything. If it's taking a water hose and cleaning culverts out, I'd do anything to help the people.
So, just for clarification, you said it would cost us $500,000, or it was $7,500 to do the engineering and design on this one culvert, and there was 7 hot spots, and it was $500,000 to do the rest of it. Can you walk me through the other $450,000?
yes, that's somewhat of the difference between different engineering firms. You know, John Freshwater does a lot of work for the town, and I think is very competitively priced. You know that 7,500 might end up being more. That was a rough guesstimate, but I don't think it's going to be much more than that amount. I mean, we're fortunate to have a good working relationship where he's able to help us out on these things, but. With that $400,000 or $500,000 amount, that's looking at, a full, design build up to the standards that would meet either the brick requirements for being, resilient infrastructure. So it's allowing stormwater infiltration. So that's like bioretention basins, bioswales. There's a lot more complexity. This is a relatively straightforward location. We have existing stormwater piping that's in place. It's just looking at, is it sized appropriately for the flow that we have there? And are there any modifications? There might not be any modifications that are needed. It might be lifting those boxes out, packing it in well underneath those boxes and setting the pipes back in place and sealing them around the boxes, and we might be good. So that's just a matter of, once we get into it, I think we'll have a better idea about what exactly we're looking at.
How many of these locations that are the 7 priority locations are roughly $7,500 for design and engineering?
I think this is probably the least expensive location. The other locations are much larger areas and much more complex. Just going through them at Sutton Drive, and hopefully that engineering and everything will be done on that, so we can use that funding. If brick is awarded or some other grant is awarded, we could use that on the construction side. The Arden Oaks flooding situation over on Dolphin Street, between Loma Linda Court and Anita Fort Drive, Neptune, leading around the circle on Neptune there where it floods on the roadway, and then Vogue Sound Drive, where it floods over at that location. And that would address, Heather, correct me if I'm wrong, I think those are the locations that were identified and prioritized as well in the Resilient Coastal Communities Program.
So what I'm getting at is that that $400,000 to $500,000 number is a design build number. What do we have, or can we get a number for the design and engineering portion only, not the build, of all of these locations, and or each one of them, so that we can look at those? But if we have that number with the engineering, then we have a pretty good idea of what the project costs. And if we can't do them all right now, we can start going down the list and checking them off as there's funding available.
Yeah, what I could do is see if John could provide us a quote for all of the project locations. He already did project design on the Sutton Drive project, which there was some disagreement on the design, but so that one's already done. But the other 6 locations, we could have him put together an estimate on that and see what that would work out to.
If we're going to get serious, I mean, if we're going to ever actually get these things done, we have to have a starting point. And design and engineering is the starting point. And so we don't have the money to do it all right now, but we do have the money to start get a plan together and know how much it's going to cost us.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. And, that was something, with the Resilient Coastal Communities Program, that was grant funding that was awarded for phase 1 and phase 2, amounted to about $30,000. And they did a lot of the preliminary analysis on these locations. But, you've got to wait for phase 3 and 4 for some of the actual engineering work, and then 4 being the construction work that comes along with it. But if we could be doing these things concurrently, whatever work we get done now is just less work we have to do through these other grant processes, so we can apply this engineering, surveying, design work to those other projects, and it would advance those along. It would also help us be more competitive for projects in the future too. So
If we could get individual estimates for each project, not one estimate for all of them, not an all or nothing, but where if we can afford to do all of it, we can look at prioritize which ones.
Yes, yeah, we could.
I think the number for design and engineering is going to be much less than that.
Right. And that's what you hope, yeah.
Which is what we're at.
Right.
We can't do the other.
Right. I think,
I would like a list of those spots. Seven spots.
Yeah, I can send that out.
yeah. But I think right now, I think that's a good point, that we should start looking at the 7, addressing the 7. I think right now, this is one of the 7. And I think this is good to just go ahead and we know the cost of the engineering. So I think this is good to just go ahead and get going. But I do agree with Martin and Morgan. I do think that we need to start getting an idea of what do we tackle next? What's it going to cost? The list of the 7 and what they're going to cost.
We have a estimate on what we believe the actual construction phase of Neptune Court is going to cost.
I'm not sure what that'll cost.
Design yet.
I know for the brick grant, the overall total project cost for construction at all locations was $1.6 million to fix all 7 locations. So that just kind of gives you a good ballpark to work off of. There could be some fluctuation. There could be some things we could do in-house, and to the extent we could do that to minimize cost. But, if it's, hopefully something like that comes about. But I think it's a good first step to go ahead and do some engineering and design work to the extent we're able to. And then as additional funding sources come along, we can have that kind of ready to go. The more shovel-ready projects we have, I think it's to our advantage when we're applying for grants, because we've already got definitive, kind of a definitive course of action to address each of the spots, but also hopefully we'll have some project construction estimates to go along with that based on whatever the engineering and design is. So what we put in for brick, we have a pretty comprehensive plan in place that focuses on a lot of resilient type infrastructure built for the current conditions and future conditions. And a lot of it's green infrastructure. It's, allowing infiltration along the run of the grassy swale, providing pre-treatment so that water quality is not adversely impacted. So there's different approaches. You could try to pipe it all, but then again, you can't be adding additional discharge to the waterways around here. So that's where you have to get creative with, bioretention facilities and infiltration along bioswales. just because we're in a coastal environment. As opposed to other parts of the state, put some stormwater infrastructure in, it might be a little bit simpler. So
This project with Neptune Court engineering, is that gonna solve the entire issue once for all in that area?
I think so, because what I asked John to look at was starting at Soundview Court and then going all the way out. So looking at that entire run of the pipe, because the flooding starts there at Neptune and Neptune Court, and then it extends all the way down the street to where this culvert crosses. So that should address, I think that should address the majority of the flooding issues there, because that's really the hot spot from Neptune to where this pipe crosses the road.
Any more discussion? All right, if not, all in favor? All right. Motion carries. All right, next up is commissioner reports. We'll start over there with Commissioner Martin.
Really nothing to report, except I don't want to sound political, but I did have a meeting with Senator Bob Steinberg today, very constructive meeting. I've never met the man. Realized he's campaigning for he is the current senator of his district combined. That said, yeah, he has an open phone line. Anybody here? Officials that want to reach out to him. He's very genuinely concerned about some of the issues that I've talked to him about, some being the stormwater. He said, if you don't ask, you don't get. That's just a mindset in Raleigh. Don't hurt to ask. I found that out a long time ago. Just so all you commissioners and the mayor know, and Zach, he has an open line of communication. If you just decide to call him, call him. That's all I got.
I don't have much to update, but just to clarify the rest of that stormwater discussion, I'd like to see some options sooner rather than later on engineering firms to get that ball rolling anyway.
I have nothing, but I do agree with Morgan. I think we should sort of get a list and get that in front of us so we can move that forward. That's all I have.
All right. Well, I just want to reiterate, I think we had some very successful special events recently, the food truck rodeo. I'd like to thank Mac Daddy's for offering to host the Easter egg hunt. I didn't have a clue there was that many kids in this county until I was there. It almost scared me a little bit. I felt like it was going to be one of those Lord of the Ring things. But the kids really enjoyed it, and they were gone like that. It's amazing. So I think you guys are doing an awesome job taking care of the town and putting on these special events. People comment on them, they like them. Everything's really going great. The neighborhood watch, I've been to those meetings. I've been really impressed with the amount of people that have been showing up for those. I figured the first one we'd have 3 or 4 people, but it seems to be the last meeting was different people. So I think people are really, really interested in that, and I look forward to the next meeting as well. So now we need to go into a closed session, I do believe, for attorney-client privilege.
I was just gonna mention real quick. So that's
Okay.
Those are the project locations for Brick up on the screen. But I'll send this out to the board as well. But that just shows each of the project locations we were just talking about. So yeah, I'll send it out to everybody. But just for informational purposes of where it is on the map and all that, it's being a little bit slow now, but I'll send it out so everybody can see
Okay,
that.
yeah, and see what Freshwater will do as far as just go ahead and give us a price on it. Maybe he might give us a package deal. If he gets all that business from us at one time, it might make a better deal out of it.
And we can
You don't know if you don't ask.
We can put an RFP out for that as well.
Yeah.
If you want to go that route. And I don't mind putting an RFP together and doing that.
Can we do an RFP with no real intent to award?
Yeah, we can do that.
What do you need, consensus or a motion?
I think you can give it.
I think everybody's agreed on that. It's no problem. Okay. Any other comments for entertaining a motion to go into a closed session for attorney-client privilege? If not, then I'll ask for a motion to do just that.
I'll make that motion.
Second,
Second.
all in favor? Thank you, everybody. You're welcome to stick around. All we're going to do is adjourn when we come back, but it just depends on if y'all got better things to do with your lives this evening. But thank you all for coming this evening. Always great to see everybody here.